First and foremost, you have a five-star wide receiver flipping his commitment from LSU to Tennessee. Yes, of course, I am talking about Tristen Keys. Had been committed to LSU for basically 5 months, 6 months before flipping to Tennessee. And a big part of that, I think, now that he's done it and we can say it, is the Adidas deal with Tennessee. He had signed an NIL deal with Adidas going into college. But initially, what are your thoughts on Tristen Keys and what he may bring to this Tennessee offense here in the future?
Yeah, I think, truthfully, not to sound alarmist, but I think it helps Kelsey Pope stay employed with the University of Tennessee because he continues to stack recruits, cycle after cycle when the performance on the field hasn't been there as much and the transfer portal haul was not that good either. But when he's recruiting the way he is, man, you look at Tristen Keys, like that's a guy Tennessee really, really wanted and they got. And then on both ends of the spectrum, you got Tristen Keys, who's probably your top target for that wide receiver group. Then you go down to like Tyreek King, who isn't as highly ranked, but it's a Knoxville guy. So if you have a guy that highly ranked in Knoxville, you need to keep him. And then they went out and got the guy they wanted. So I think Tristen Keys, you could always kind of tell he was going to flip just because he kept recruiting, kept going on visits, kept talking to coaches, kept posting. Whether it was Tennessee or not was to be determined. But obviously he did flip to Tennessee, and that's a big get and a guy you can kind of have impact your offense immediately. And, we see the state of the wide receiver room right now. So I think it's really, really young, but I think, Keys is a guy who can push through and make an impact very early for that group. And that's what they need. They need guys who can come in early and play because, right now we don't see that. It took Mike Matthews a while. It took Braylon Staley. I think he had a lot of talent, but just didn't get on the field as much. So I think getting a guy like Tristen Keys is huge for this group.
Well, I feel like Tennessee hasn't really had like a dominant force at receiver since like Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman are there. So, I mean, hopefully Tristen Keys can be that wide receiver that steps up and ends up helping Tennessee in the passing game. And we saw signs that he was going to flip beforehand, like the dancing around in the locker room, the orange pants recently, I think at like a 7-on-7 event. And then, as you mentioned, Tucker, the Adidas deal probably played a factor into his decision. But, Tennessee's recruiting class is on a hot streak right now. I mean, they got the number one quarterback in the country in Faison Brandon. They now have the number one wide receiver in Tristen Keys. And then not to mention Gabriel Asenda, who's the number 4 offensive tackle, and Salsa Moa. I mean, Tennessee's got 4 5-stars on their team now, which I can't recall the last time Tennessee's done that. So credit to Josh Heupel and the coaching staff. And like you mentioned with Kelsey Pope, I mean, continuing to be dominant in recruiting. I mean, I feel like this was a huge get for Tennessee, and they were a few moves away. I mean, if Hyder would have picked Tennessee, and the other offensive lineman, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, Tennessee would have had 4 players that were ranked number 1 at their position. So Tennessee's doing a phenomenal job at recruiting right now. And I think a lot of fans should be excited for Tristen Keys.
Yeah, so I did watch his highlight reel before we got on here today. And I, of course, liked what I saw. It's a 5-star kid, very much looks like a 5-star. He goes 6'3", 180, which is in the profile of some of the Heupel receivers that we've seen here. Guys like Cedric Tillman, Dante Thornton, even Chris Brazel. Granted, those guys are all very different wide receivers from one another, but I would say, if anything, he's closest to Dante Thornton just because obviously he's got the height, but also he's got the breakaway speed, could definitely win the one-on-one matchups, can burn you in that regard. And one other thing, too, that I saw in the highlight reel that I liked, he's not afraid to show you that he can block as well. That's something that is always an added bonus in your wide receivers. And you've seen a couple really great blocking wide receivers come through Tennessee in the last 10 years in Juwan Jennings and Brew McCoy. So that could be a big help for this team in the future as well.
Yeah, I think Jordan brought up a good point with all the, truthfully, Tennessee's ceiling is probably around the 6, 7, 8 mark in recruiting, just with the way the sport is right now. As much as Alabama's going to struggle, they're going to have the name brand Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State. Those schools are always going to be up there in recruiting. A&M's always going to bankroll guys. So I think Tennessee, 247 right now for the 26 class shows they're 7 and overall in composite. I think that's probably the high end of where Tennessee can be. And I think you get a couple portal kids and you stay in the battle for these 5-star guys. Like Tennessee is always mentioned with these 5-star guys, like Jordan said. And all of a sudden you're going to have years like this. And hopefully you start to stack kids where, hey, Tennessee was in this kid's top 10. Then he's in his kid's top 5. And all of a sudden you look 2 years later and he's on the field in Neyland Stadium. Like that's how it happens. And staying in those conversations and having Tennessee be a name brand in recruiting goes a long way. And I think you see that right now with, being Hyder's second choice. Obviously not the best situation, but then you get guys like Tristen Keys, Mike Matthews was a big pickup in his class, like starting to stack 5-stars. Faison Brandon isn't talked about a ton, but he's, top quarterback, 1 or 2 in the class and is having that year so far in high school, or I think they're about to get started. So, it's just always Tennessee being in conversation, just in conversation for the 5-stars is a big step, but starting to land some of these guys and creating very good recruiting classes is big.
So one more recruiting news, or piece of recruiting news, I should say, from the past few hours, actually. Tennessee got a flip from Auburn and defensive end Hezekiah Harris. He was a 4-star, committed to Auburn pretty early in his cycle, like I want to say July 2024. So he had been committed there for over a year, and Tennessee's ultimately able to flip him. He'd been on several visits to Tennessee too. Like he had been committed to Auburn, but I want to say there were like 5 or 6 visits between now and then to Tennessee. But guys, what are your initial thoughts on Hezekiah Harris just after seeing him commit to Tennessee?
Yeah, I think both of these conversations, you've seen 2 guys commit in 2 important positions for Tennessee. You see a wide receiver and you see an edge rusher, and we've seen Tennessee recruit those positions well. And, with a guy like Hezekiah Harris, once again, a guy being that highly ranked and committed to Auburn with the way that program is right now, I'm not shocked that he's flipped. But it's a big pickup for Tennessee, and it's a big pickup for Coach Chop, who's really involved in his recruiting and was big in getting that last visit for him, and everything that goes along with that and closing the deal. And again, a lot of this comes down to, money and stuff, but Tennessee is really big on creating the relationships that, maybe if they're off on number, that those can kind of bridge the gap and seal the deal. So I think Tennessee just keeps stacking recruits, and you get guys like Hezekiah Harris in the building. And once again, you look in 2 years and that guy can be an SEC starter, or for a guy of his frame, honestly, he could, compete for a job year 1. So I'm not shocked to see that. And I'm sure the way Tennessee wants to use him and having James Pierce playing for the Atlanta Falcons now definitely helped in that recruiting, I'm sure.
Well, I feel like he's got like a similar size to James Pierce too. Very tall, lanky defensive end here. And James Pierce was never the biggest guy in terms of muscle mass. But I feel like he's a good pickup for Tennessee because like we were talking about earlier about the depth at the defensive line being an issue, which is something I don't think we thought going into the season, but injuries has kind of like forced Tennessee into a difficult situation. And, Tennessee didn't really target many edge rushers in this recruiting class. Like he's the 3rd edge commit for the class of 2026. So I think he's a good get for Tennessee. I thought that, since he's got such a long body, it really was helpful for him getting tackles for loss, like being able to reach out and roll the running back up in the backfield. And if you look at a lot of his highlights, most of them are in the backfield. So he seems to do a good job at getting tackles for a loss. And he seems comfortable in all different types of stances. I saw him line up 2-point, 3-point, 4-point stance. The only like real issues that I see with him is like potentially pad level, but he's also like borderline 6'6". And the offensive line that he was playing against wasn't very big either that I saw. A lot of them look significantly shorter than him. But overall, 4-star edge. We know that Rodney Gardner is going to get the best out of the players that he gets from defensive line. So I think he's a good pickup for Tennessee. With his size and everything, he has potential to put on a lot more mass. And I guess we could see his potential, but I still think there's just a couple of things that he could work on, or at least from a first glance.
Elusiveness and pursuit are two words that came to my mind when watching his highlights. A guy that can, like you said, Jordan, he's a little bit of a smaller stature, or at least he's not as heavy as some of these defensive ends that you see, so he can shift around a little bit, make it hard on offensive linemen. And he doesn't give up on the play either. You see many instances where it looks like he's blocked, but he sees the runner, and then he takes off, and the offensive lineman can't stop him, and he gets the runners down. So I think I like that quality about him. And that's something that actually, that now that you mentioned James Pierce, he had a little bit of trouble with it at Tennessee. The big knock on him going into the NFL was, can this guy be a really good run stopper? Because most of his stuff was just pass rush. And that's what got him into the first round. I don't think that's as much of the case with Hezekiah Harris. I think he could do a little bit of it all. In fact, I think he's much better at pursuing the run than what we saw out of James Pierce, just because it's not that whole bull in a china shop look that you saw at times with James Pierce just flying into the backfield, and then suddenly the running backs are 3-4 yards down the field already. But those are two big items that we had to cover this week in recruiting. We'll see if there are any more flips, but 24 commitments in the class now for Tennessee, so that means, of course, it's pretty full.